Hey guys, Ryan here from RyTek Marine. I'm going to show you today installing one of our transducer brackets. These brackets are for all of Lowrance's structure scan transducers. So your total scan, 3D, LSS1 and 2, and then the new 3-in-1 and 3-in-2. So it's kind of nice, works with all transducers. It also works with a boat that you're kind of retrofitting a transducer bracket to a boat that already has 3D structure scans. So the problem with the 3D transducers is that typically if something you want to swap out mounts or whatnot, you've already got it installed. The way the transducer is on the 3D scan is the wire actually comes up through the center. So you actually have to either cut your stock bracket somehow with the stock stainless one to fit through the wire, or you have to pull the whole cable right from the entire boat and then route it through the hole on the bracket and then route it back up through the boat. So it's kind of nice. I cut a slot into this one here that you can actually use it to get away from having to pull the cable on that. So really the 3D structure scan is the only one that needs to be done that way, but all the rest, no problem. Any of them, they all work perfectly with the brackets. So give you a little rundown on the brackets. So they're made entirely of 304 stainless steel, so never going to rust in salt water or anything like that, or any water for that matter. They're all 1/8 inch stainless steel, laser cut CSC formed, so they're perfect. As far as cut wise, all that stuff, nothing real sharp anywhere that you're going to get cut or anything like that on. There's a lot of cool little features I've designed into these too that I'll show you in a little bit here. As far size wise, basically they're physically almost the exact same as the stock brackets. So I don't have a stamped stainless one or the stamped steel one to show you of the stock bracket, but the plastic one, I ended up breaking 2 plastic brackets just in waves. Got into rough water both times. They're about a month apart, but I typically fish the Great Lakes here in Ontario and never get into rivers or anything really like that I would have been hitting logs or anything like that. But the one time we were up on Georgian Bay and getting into pretty rough water, and I don't know if it was just the length of the boat in conjunction with the wave heights, but just kept coming down onto the waves, and all of a sudden I noticed my arches were more vertical lines, and looked down and the transducer bracket and the transducer are broken apart, just hanging there. So I had to cut and bring the actual total scan into the boat, and before we took off, luckily I realized it before we started running back to the dock. But so broke the other one. That one was clean off. The other one I just broke, fractured in the actual joint there. Same sort of scenario that day, and then I just had enough with it and started playing around with these last winter. So I wasn't a huge fan of the stock stainless ones. And I say stainless because they were stainless. Now the new brackets are actually just basically a thin steel sheet metal that's actually galvanized. So not 100% sure why they went that route, especially there are a lot of guys that run these transducers in saltwater also, so that's not really going to be that great of a thing for the guys down in say Florida or anywhere saltwater. I've shipped a couple of these brackets actually to Australia already that'd be running in salt. So yeah, I don't know why they would have went that route, but anyway, that happened. So mine are all stainless steel, and the other thing I wasn't a huge fan, there's 2 things I didn't like about the stock steel ones, was because they're only a real thin gauge 16th inch material or less actually. Just the way they were formed, and they create a little bit, everything's smooth on them, but because I have my transducer mounted here below my swim ladder, I was concerned that just with that little ridge and all that stuff, when my kids ever come up and they slip on the ladder and the foot goes through, that you can actually get into a sharper area that you can slice your foot on. It doesn't have to be physically sharp, but that thin gauge steel could actually cause a little bit of a slice there. The other thing with there's 3 things in total with the steel brackets I wasn't a fan of. The main one though was actual wire routing. A lot of guys will actually take the steel bracket, the stock one, say it was this one, mount it backwards, and then they have to take the cable and pull it over and then just zip tie it all up, and basically there's no kinks in the cable going that route, but it's just not very good wire management that way. Then other guys will mount it this way and have to go around the bracket, and then you get into pinching, chafing on the bracket and all that stuff, and I was not a huge fan of that because, as you know, these transducers are cheap, and if you actually cut through the wire, you're basically left with nothing but replacing the whole thing. So I didn't like that there. So wire management was a big one, and the other thing is because it's so thin sheet metal, I was hearing about a lot of guys that actually were pulling the little stainless steel threaded inserts that are into the plastic there out, because what happens is that thin sheet metal isn't totally rigid, and things are flexing and pulling, and because it can actually twist them, mine of course you can't twist stainless steel, it takes a 80-ton press to actually bend and form these things. So but with that thin sheet metal, that twisting and all that stuff will actually work on pulling the inserts out of the plastic transducer there. So guys were talking about pulling their inserts right out and the transducer falling off the brackets. So that's basically what was causing that issue. So I'll give you a little rundown. There's a couple other neat things about my transducer that I've done. So compared to the stock one, I actually have, you can see here, the slots in the back. Everything is the exact same. Use the same hardware. All the holes into your boat, everything, or starboard, are all the exact same. I've actually incorporated almost 9/16 of an inch more up and down travel into these slots. So you can see bracket outside dimensions are about the same, but there's a lot more actual slot here. That so you can lift the actual transducer up and down. Say you went with, originally you put a total scan on, you're swapping over to the new 3-in-1. It's actually a little bit taller there, so you might actually have to lift the bracket up further on the water to get it just skimming the water where you want to, right? So with this bracket, you don't have to drill new holes into your starboard or into your boat or fiberglass. You just undo the bolts and slide up that extra half an inch or whatever it takes. So that's kind of neat there. When it comes to the brackets, some people I've dealt with already, they've one of the things they said was, I can't get enough height, or I'm actually limited to the amount of how high up the bracket can be, because say there's a step pad on your fiberglass boat that you couldn't get up high enough. So what I actually came up with there was different rear brackets, or the upper brackets that actually screw to the transom. So different heights compared to the stock one here. So stock height from the actual bottom of the transducer bracket to the top is 3 inches. I have a short one that you just unbolt, bolt the new one back on, and that's 2 1/4 inches. So that's actually a lot more. You can see here when I actually put it side by side there, what the difference in height is. So it actually brings the transducer up closer, maybe to the step pad or anything like that. Other guys have talked about, previous installer that put the transducer on the boat, but starboard way up high, like an inch or inch and a half off the actual bottom of the hull, the bottom of the boat. So they can never, without moving the starboard down, they can never drop their transducer down far enough. So I came up with just an extended version. So instead of 3 inches overall height, then it's 3 3/4. So you get an extra 3/4 of the inch just by swapping out the brackets. So you can just see how that kind of works there, so that a little bit of a height difference. One other cool little feature I've incorporated into this is I put these little notches, you'll see on the outside of the bracket. They're really hard to see. There's on the outside bracket, the top bracket, there's a little notch that I've cut into there. And one thing I recommend, once you get the boat in the water and you run it, you got your transducer level with the water, not with the boat of course, that you got perfect arches. What I recommend doing is just taking a waterproof Sharpie mark or whatnot, and actually where that notch is, just actually make a mark on the mating bracket. That'd be the lower bracket. So then, when you're out in the water, you get that level, and that becomes then a actual visual reference point. When you get out to, say, pull out of the water that one day, you pull the boat out, quick look, lines are still lining up, nothing ever moved. You didn't hit a stump or something in the water that would have caused the transducer to kick up. That here it's way out from where I just marked it. So you push it back down, lines up perfectly, tighten it down, and away you go. You got the angles, your arches are going to be perfect yet again. So So you just mark that there, and you go from there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I'm showing you the actual installation here in a minute. So that is pretty well it. So as far as tool-wise goes, what I recommend, Sharpie marker just for that little piece. Phillips screwdriver number 2 Phillips takes the transducer off of your bracket and puts it back on. And then we need 2 9/16 inch wrenches just for tightening the 3/8 bolt. And in my case, the transducer was screwed to the actual starboard with Robertson screws. So I have 2 different lengths of Robertson screwdrivers here. Tape measure just in case you need it, of course. And the other thing that's very important, I find, and I highly recommend, is dish soap. Whenever you're working with stainless steel hardware is notorious for thread galling. What that is you go and tighten the nut onto the bolt, and it may not even be tight to where you want it, and already you can feel the nut actually getting like torquing up. And what's happening there with stainless steel is the galling is actually the 2 pieces, the nut and the bolt, actually welding themselves together. So just by taking a little bit of dish soap, you actually put that on the thread before you do it, and you'll have no issues at all. It goes down, you can torque it down however you want. The other thing is, for the wire management, I incorporate this little grommet into the top there, and I just recommend putting a little bit of dish soap on the grommet before you slide it in. That just makes everything go in real nice, and once the boat's in the water, the dish soap goes away, of course, and then everything's nice and tight and no issues. So I'll show you the installation, we'll go from there. Thanks.